Can we put our differences aside and have a talk?
Jessica has got a little bit more June bug in her than I thought she did. I mean, she'll do anything that benefits her, but I'm hungry, so I guess I'll sit here and see what she's got to say.
The courtroom was unusually quiet that morning, as if everyone inside sensed that something unexpected was about to unfold. The long wooden benches were filled with reporters, curious onlookers, and a few close family members who had gathered to witness what many were already calling one of the most talked-about hearings of the year. At the center of it all sat Jessica, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her expression was calm, but her eyes revealed a mix of tension and determination. This trial was not just about legal arguments. It was about truth, family, and long-standing questions that had finally reached a breaking point. Across the room, Pumpkin sat beside Josh. Pumpkin's posture was stiff, her gaze fixed forward, while Josh appeared more restless. He shifted slightly in his seat, occasionally glancing toward the door, as if anticipating something or someone. Then the doors opened. Mama June walked in. The atmosphere changed instantly. There was a subtle murmur across the courtroom, quickly silenced by a firm call to order from the judge. Mama June didn't rush. She moved steadily, her expression composed, her eyes focused. Whatever she had come to reveal, she carried it with quiet confidence. Jessica noticed her first. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, support, perhaps, or reassurance. Jessica straightened slightly, as if Mama June's presence alone had given her strength. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at the documents in front of him. "We will now proceed," he said calmly. "This session will focus on the evidence presented regarding the disputed claims." A lawyer stood up, signaling the beginning of what many had been waiting for. "Your Honor, today we present new findings that may significantly impact the direction of this case." There was a pause, just long enough to build anticipation. Pumpkin's fingers tightened around the edge of her seat. Josh exhaled slowly. Mama June remained still. "Call your witness," the judge said. The lawyer turned slightly. "We call Mama June to the stand." Another ripple moved through the room. Mama June stepped forward, took the oath, and sat down. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady and clear. "I'm here to tell the truth," she said simply. The lawyer nodded. "Can you explain why you believe your testimony is important in this case?" Mama June took a moment before answering, choosing her words carefully. "Because this situation has affected our family deeply. There have been misunderstandings, and I believe the truth needs to be heard so everyone can move forward." Jessica listened closely, her expression softening. The lawyer continued, "Did you come across any information that led you to question previous assumptions?" Mama June nodded. "Yes. Over time, certain things didn't add up. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I made sure to look into it properly." Josh shifted again, this time more noticeably. Pumpkin glanced at him, concern flickering across her face. "And what did you find?" the lawyer asked. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Mama June reached into her folder and carefully placed a document on the stand. "I requested a DNA test," she said. The words landed heavily. A faint murmur spread before being silenced once again. The judge leaned forward slightly. "This is new evidence." "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer confirmed. "This test was conducted through certified procedures and verified independently." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Mama June continued. "I didn't do this to hurt anyone. I did it because I believe the truth would help us understand what's really going on." Jessica's eyes glistened slightly, though she remained composed. Pumpkin looked stunned. Josh's face had gone pale. The lawyer approached the bench, handing over copies of the document. "These results," he said, "directly address the questions raised earlier in this case." The judge reviewed the papers carefully, his expression unreadable. Seconds felt like minutes. No one spoke. Finally, the judge looked up. "These findings," he said slowly, "are indeed significant." A wave of tension swept through the room. Jessica inhaled deeply. Pumpkin's eyes filled with uncertainty. Josh stared straight ahead, frozen. The judge continued, "Before we proceed further, I want to ensure that all parties understand the implications of this evidence. This is not just a procedural matter. It affects the core of the claims being made. The lawyer nodded respectfully. Understood, Your Honor. Mama June remained calm, but her hands were now clasped tightly together. The judge turned his attention toward the opposing side. Do you wish to respond at this stage? There was a brief pause before their lawyer stood. Your Honor, we would like a moment to review the documents in detail. Granted, the judge said. As the opposing side leaned in to examine the papers, whispers began to circulate among the spectators. Jessica sat quietly, her mind racing. Pumpkin looked conflicted, her emotions clearly visible. Josh closed his eyes briefly, as if trying to process everything at once. And Mama June, she simply waited. Because whatever came next, the truth was now on the table, and nothing would be the same again. The courtroom remained suspended in a tense silence as the opposing counsel carefully reviewed the DNA report. Every page turned seemed louder than it should have been, echoing faintly through the room. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on everyone present. Jessica watched closely, her eyes fixed on the lawyer holding the documents. She searched for any hint, any reaction, that might reveal what those results truly meant. But the lawyer's expression remained controlled, almost unreadable. Across the aisle, Pumpkin leaned slightly toward Josh. Her voice was barely audible, but her concern was clear. Did you know about this? She whispered. Josh hesitated. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he shook his head slowly. No, he said, his voice tight. I didn't. Pumpkin leaned back, her face pale. The situation was slipping out of her control, and she could feel it. At the front, the judge tapped his pen lightly against the desk. Counsel, he said, breaking the silence, have you had sufficient time to review the evidence? The lawyer stood, holding the papers carefully. Yes, Your Honor, he replied. We have reviewed the document. And, the judge prompted. The lawyer took a breath. We acknowledge that the DNA test appears to have been conducted through proper channels. However, we would like to question the circumstances under which it was obtained. A subtle shift moved through the courtroom. Mama June raised her head slightly. Jessica frowned. The judge nodded. You may proceed. The lawyer turned toward Mama June. Ms. June, can you clarify how you arranged for this DNA test? Mama June met his gaze, without hesitation. I followed the legal process, she said. I made sure everything was done correctly. I didn't want any doubts about its validity. The lawyer stepped closer. Did all involved parties consent to this test? Mama June paused briefly, then answered carefully. The test was conducted within legal guidelines. I ensured that it would be recognized in court. The lawyer narrowed his eyes slightly, but did not press further. Instead, he turned back to the judge. Your Honor, while we respect the procedures followed, we believe more context is needed before drawing conclusions. The judge leaned back in his chair. Context will be considered. However, the results themselves cannot be ignored. The room fell quiet again. Jessica's heart pounded. She could feel it in her chest, steady but strong. This moment, this evidence, could change everything she had been fighting for. The judge adjusted the papers in front of him once more. For the sake of clarity, he said, I will summarize what has been presented. Everyone leaned forward slightly. The DNA report indicates a discrepancy between prior assumptions and the actual findings, the judge continued. This discrepancy raises important questions regarding the claims made earlier in this case. Pumpkin looked down, her hands trembling slightly. Josh swallowed hard. Jessica held her breath. The judge's voice remained calm, but firm. At this stage, I will not make a final ruling. However, I will say this. The evidence presented today is substantial and cannot be dismissed. A quiet murmur spread again. Mama June closed her eyes for a brief second, as if gathering strength. The judge then turned his attention toward Jessica. Ms. Jessica, he said, this trial concerns matters that directly affect you. Would you like to make a statement at this time? Jessica hesitated. All eyes were now on her. She stood slowly, her movements deliberate. For a moment, she said nothing. She simply looked around the courtroom, at the judge, at the lawyers, at Pumpkin, and finally, at Josh. When she spoke, her voice was steady. I didn't come here to create conflict, she began. I came here because I needed answers. Her words hung in the air. For a long time, she continued, there were things that didn't make sense to me. I tried to ignore them, to move forward without questioning anything. But eventually, I realized that I deserved to know the truth. Pumpkin's eyes filled with emotion. Josh looked down. Jessica took a breath. This isn't about blaming anyone. It's about understanding what's real and what's not. And now we finally have something that helps us see that more clearly. She sat down. The courtroom remained silent for a few seconds, as if everyone needed time to absorb what she had said. The judge nodded slightly.
Thank you, he said.
He then looked toward the attorneys. Given the significance of this new evidence, I am ordering a temporary recess. This will allow both sides to review the findings in full and prepare their next steps. A gavel strike echoed through the room. Court is in recess. Almost instantly, the tension shifted. People began to move, whisper, and gather in small groups. Reporters quietly discussed what they had just witnessed, while family members exchanged uncertain glances. Jessica remained seated for a moment, her hands resting in her lap. She exhaled slowly, as if releasing a burden she had carried for far too long. Mama June approached her. You did good, Mama June said softly. Jessica looked up, a faint but genuine smile forming. I just told the truth. Nearby, Pumpkin stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Josh spoke quietly to his lawyer, his voice urgent but controlled. Nothing had been fully decided yet, but one thing was clear. The truth had begun to surface. And when the court reconvened, the next phase of this trial would be even more intense. The courtroom doors slowly opened again after the recess, and people began to return to their seats. The earlier tension had not faded. In fact, it had deepened. What had once been a case filled with assumptions was now shifting into something far more serious. Jessica walked back in with a calm but focused expression. She no longer looked uncertain. There was a quiet strength in the way she carried herself now, as if the truth, no matter how complicated, had given her clarity. Mama June followed closely behind, her face composed. She glanced around the room, briefly observing Pumpkin and Josh before taking her seat again. Pumpkin entered next.
Her steps were slower this time.
She looked thoughtful, even shaken. The confidence she had shown earlier had softened, replaced by visible concern. Josh came in beside her, but there was a noticeable distance between them now, something unspoken but clear. The judge returned shortly after, taking a seat and calling the session back to order. Court is now back in session, he said firmly. The room quieted instantly. The judge looked down at the documents again before addressing both sides. We will now proceed with further clarification regarding the DNA evidence and its implications. Jessica's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, we would like to call an expert witness to provide additional explanation about the test results. The judge nodded. Proceed. A professional-looking individual stepped forward and took the oath. His demeanor was calm and precise, the kind of presence that brought a sense of authority to the room. Please state your role, the lawyer requested. I am a certified forensic analyst, the witness replied. I specialize in genetic testing and verification procedures. The lawyer nodded. Can you confirm whether the DNA test presented in this court is accurate and reliable? The expert adjusted his glasses slightly.
Yes.
Based on my review, the procedures followed meet all standard requirements. The results are consistent and scientifically valid. A quiet ripple moved through the audience. Pumpkin looked down again. Josh remained still, but his expression tightened. The lawyer continued, without going into unnecessary technical detail, can you explain what the results indicate? The expert paused briefly, choosing his words carefully. The results indicate that the previously assumed biological connection does not align with the actual genetic findings. The statement was clear and powerful. Jessica closed her eyes for a brief second, absorbing the moment. Mama June sat still, her expression serious but steady. Pumpkin's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Josh looked forward, his face now completely drained of color. The opposing lawyer, stood up quickly. Your Honor, we would like to cross-examine the witness. Proceed, the judge replied. The lawyer approached with measured steps. You mentioned that the results are consistent, he began. Is there any possibility of error in such tests? The expert responded calmly. While no test in the world is absolutely free from the possibility of error, the likelihood in this case is extremely low. The procedures followed were precise, and the verification process supports the outcome. The lawyer nodded slowly. So, in your professional opinion, these results should be taken seriously? Yes, the expert said firmly. The lawyer paused, then stepped back. The impact of the testimony settled over the courtroom like a heavy silence. The judge looked toward Josh. Would you like to make a statement? He asked. All eyes turned once again. Josh hesitated. For the first time since the trial began, he seemed unsure, not just of what to say, but of how to say it. He stood up slowly. I didn't expect this, he admitted. His voice was quieter than before, but still clear enough to be heard. He glanced briefly at Pumpkin, then back at the judge. There were things I believed to be true, he continued. And now, I don't know what to think. Pumpkin's eyes filled with emotion. Jessica watched silently. Josh took a breath. I never intended to create confusion or hurt anyone. If there are misunderstandings, then I want them to be resolved properly. He sat down. The courtroom remained still. The judge nodded thoughtfully. This court recognizes that the situation has become more complex. However, complexity does not change the importance of truth. He turned toward Pumpkin. Do you wish to speak? Pumpkin looked up slowly. For a moment, she seemed uncertain, but then she stood. Her voice trembled slightly at first. I believed in what I was told, she said. I trusted that everything was as it seemed. She paused, gathering herself. But now, I see that there are things I didn't fully understand. She looked at Jessica, her expression softer than before. I never wanted things to reach this point, Pumpkin added. But if this is the truth, then we have to face it. She sat down. Mama June watched quietly, her expression reflecting a mixture of relief and concern. The judge folded his hands together. What we have heard today marks a turning point in this case, he said. The DNA evidence, supported by expert testimony, raises serious questions that must be addressed with care. He paused before continuing. This court will take all statements and evidence into consideration before moving toward a final decision. Jessica felt a steady calm settle over her. For the first time, it seemed like everything was finally being seen clearly. But the outcome was still uncertain. And one final step remained. The judge lifted his gavel slightly. We will proceed to the final phase of this hearing in the next session. A soft echo followed as the gavel came down. Court is adjourned for now. As people slowly began to stand and leave, the atmosphere was different than before. Not just tense, but transformed. Because now, the truth was no longer hidden. And whatever came next would decide everything.